have to endure. I, not having had to make the journey regularly each end of term and each beginning of a new term, could not understand why my brother disliked walking so much, especially after being cramped in an airless bus for such a long time. The bus journey to the mission took nearly an hour. Besides the relief of being able to stretch your legs after such a long journey, the walk home from the bus terminus was not a long wait when you had nowhere to hurry to. The road wound down by the fields where there were always some people with whom to pass 10 minutes of the day, inquiring about their health and the health of their family, admiring the broad-leafed abundance of the maize crop when it was good, predicting how many bags the field would yield, or wondering whether the plants had tasseled too early or too late. And although the stretch of road between the fields and the terminus was exposed to the sun and was, from September to April, except when it rained, harsh and scorching, so that the glare from the sand scratched at your eyes, there was always shade by the fields where clumps of trees were deliberately left standing to shelter us when we ate our meals, or rested between cultivating strips of the land. From the fields, the road grew shadier with shrubs and trees. Acacia, lantana, masasa, and mopani clustered about on either side. If you had time, you could run off the road into more wooded areas to look for matamba and matunduru, sweet and sour, delicious. From this woody section the road rolled down into a shallow ravine, a river valley thoughtfully appointed along its floor with smooth, flat-topped boulders which made exciting equipment for all sorts of our childhood games. Across and around the lowest of these boulders, the river flowed sparsely in a dry season, but deeply enough in places when the rains were heavy to cover a child's head and to engulf me to my nipples. We learned to avoid these places when the river flowed violently, but in most seasons it flowed placidly enough to permit bathing along most of its length. As children, we were not restricted. We could play where we pleased. But the women had their own spot for bathing, and the men their own too. Where the women washed, the river was shallow, seldom reaching above my knees, and the rocks were lower and flatter there than in other places, covering most of the riverbed. The women liked their spot because it was sensibly architectured for doing the laundry. But we were apprehensive about growing so big that we would have to wash there with the women and no longer be able to swim in the deeper, cooler, more interesting pools. The river, the trees, the fruit and the fields. This was how it was in the beginning. This is how I remember it in my earliest memories. But it did not stay like that. While I was still quite young, to enable administration of our area, the government built its district council houses less than a mile away from the places where we washed. Thus it became necessary for all the inhabitants of the dozen or so homesteads that made up our village to cross Nyamarira, as our river is called, whenever we went on business to the council houses. It was not long before the entrepreneurial among us, noticing that there were always more people gathered at the council house than anywhere else in the village, except at church on Sundays and on other days in places where beer was being drunk, built their little tuck shops which sold the groceries we needed, bread, tea, sugar, jam, salt, cooking oil, matches, candles, paraffin and soap, there beside the council houses. I do not remember the exact sequence of this development, whether the place became a bus terminus before or after the tuck shops were built, but soon buses were stopping there too. Idle, the less industrious youth of the village began to loiter around the tuck shops, buying each other when they could afford to, which was not often, Fanta and Coca-Cola and perfume that smelt of vanilla essence, cheap at a tikia bottle. An enterprising owner of one of the tuck shops, taking advantage of this, introduced a gramophone into his shop, so that the youth could entertain themselves with music and dancing. They played the new rumba that, as popular music will, pointed